Alright, so today we are going to create an app that will be another kind of calculator, really just using it to kind of show you some different input-output types of devices. So we're going to look at radio buttons, checkboxes, and also combo boxes and choice boxes in this tutorial. So I'm going to start off with just this app, very similar to what we've done in the past with a pane organizer. You can kind of see, but very cookie cutter. Over on the pane organizer, I'm kind of starting off with some cookie cutter as well, so I'll give you a second to kind of get that part in. And then from here, we're going to, again, make this calculator that is going to be put into the center pane. Okay, so our calculator is going to have two parts. It's going to have a center and a bottom. Let's go ahead and create our center, and that's going to be an H box. So if you can imagine, on the left, we're going to have our first number. In the center, we're going to have our operator, and the right we're going to have our second number, and then the bottom section of the border pane is going to be our solution, or the answer to the calculation. So we're going to have a center here for an H box. Okay, we're going to import our H box. Okay, in this H box, let's just set a couple parameters. So set alignment. Remember, our spacing gives us space around each of the objects, and our insets gives us space around, or our padding gives us space around the whole box. Okay, so now that we have some basic formatting there, again, let me put a couple comments in here. So the left is going to be a choice box with the first number. And then the center is going to be radio buttons for the operator. And then the right is going to be a combo box for the second number. And we're going to see the combo box and the choice box are very similar, so there's not much difference there. Alright, so let's go ahead and create our first number here. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to actually put this into a VBox, because we're going to have two pieces. We're going to have a checkbox that tells us if the number is negative or positive, and then we're going to have a number that we're going to actually select. So we'll create this. We'll call this left equals new VBox. Import our VBox, some spacing around it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our choice box. We're going to say first num equals new choice box. Okay. Now with our voice box, we have to actually tell it what kind of values we're going to put in there, and so we're going to put integers, and this needs to be the object version of integer. So we're going to put integer objects into our choice box. Okay. And now what we can do is we can, similar to how we add to our nodes, we're going to say first num dot get items dot add all. And we're going to add our number 0, 1, 2, and 9. This is basically taking an observable list. It's just as easy to create it this way. I'm not going to get into observable lists in this video. Okay. Now we want to set a default value so that we have something when it starts. If it doesn't have a number, some of our other calculations may not work. So I'm going to say first num dot set value, and we'll set it to someplace in the middle for a 5. Okay, so that creates our box. Now we also want to have a checkbox that essentially allows us to make that number negative, and we're going to use this as a checkbox instead of other things. So what we're going to do is create that checkbox. But that checkbox, we actually want it to be used outside of this method, and so we're going to define it initially up here. So I'm going to say private. And our checkbox is just a checkbox, and we're going to call this first num neg, and we're going to also create a second one, second num neg. So we'll define both of them right now. Okay, and then again, import checkbox from JavaFX. Okay, now that we've created that, we can come down here, first num neg equals new checkbox. And in the constructor, we can actually pass it a value. So we'll say negative, question mark. Okay. Now we can go back and put both of these into our VBox. Add all, so we're going to add our first num neg and our first num into our VBox. And that's basically the left side. Now let's just copy this over and do the right side while we're at it. It's going to be very similar. Okay, but now instead of using the choice box, we're going to use a combo box. So we're going to say combo box here and combo box there. This is going to be second num, and it's import. Okay, now we just need to change these values here, so I'm going to do that and come back to you. Alright, so now I've just basically changed everything to second num. I changed this back to right, so we're putting those in. So that's our right side operator. Now let's go back to our center now. So our center is going to be radio buttons, and they are a little bit different than you might think, because we have to not only create the buttons, but we have to put them into a group. And one of the problems that we have with radio buttons in this kind of application is anytime we want to check, we can't just say, okay, tell me which one is checked. We have to actually go through each of them and see, is that particular one checked as a Boolean. But let's go ahead and create these. And again, we're going to put the definition of these up top, but for right now, we'll create our VBox. It's going to hold all four of these operators. We'll call it middle equals new VBox. And like we have done before, we are going to set some spacing. Okay, now I'm going to define my my VBox or my radio buttons up here, and they're just simply a radio button. And I'm going to call them add, subtract, divide, multiply, and divide. Okay, and we'll import that from JavaFX. Right, so now down here I can create them. So I'm going to say add equals new radio button. And again, I'm doing it here because it doesn't really allow me to just find the value easily, so I'm going to have to use a whole bunch of if statements when it comes to actually doing my calculation, which I'm going to do in another method. So subtract, alright, so now I've created my four buttons. Now I'm going to put them in what we call a toggle group. So I'm going to create that toggle group here, and I'm going to give it a name, so I'll just call it operator. It was new. And essentially what we're doing is creating a group of which only one of these buttons can be toggled. So it basically says, okay, if any button in that group, only one can be toggled. If I switch one button, then it goes and it switches the one off from the other one and switches that next one back on. Now it's a little bit of a pain in the neck, but I have to go now and do a set toggle group. Oops. So set toggle group to operator for each of that. I'm going to do that for the other three as well. Okay, and again, I want to have default values when I'm starting, so I'm going to just say add dot set selected to true, and that will basically say, okay, I'm going to start with that button selected. And finally, add these to my middle section. Middle dot So add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Alright, so now I'm going to come down here below my right section. Now I'm going to go back to my center, which was an H box. I'm going to say get children and add all. Now I can add my left, middle, and right sections. Okay, so that's my main part. I do want to have a bottom part, and the bottom is going to have my answer. So I'm going to create that now. I'm going to basically use a H box just so I can get some alignment with it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a label, solution equals label, and I'm going to populate a default initial value plus, and then this is where I'm going to create a method, and I'm going to call my method getAnswer. Okay, and I'm going to pass it my first number and my second number. So to get my first number, it is first num dot get value, and then my second num, which is second num dot get value. And then close that and create it. Let me double check here. So label, import label from JavaFX, and then I need a plus there. And now it's going to tell me I don't have my getAnswer, but I'm going to create my method getAnswer. And this is going to have a void return, and it's going to pass 2 integers, but for right now I'm just going to say return 0.0. And we'll work on that in a little bit. That's right, the answer here is not a void, it is a double. It's just going to return. Okay, so that's my my solution text. Hold on a second. Do I have an extra one of those? Yes. Okay. Okay, so then I'm going to create an H box for my bottom. And then bottom dot get children. Add solution. Okay, and now I need to go back and set my center. So I'm going to say root dot set center, and that's going to be my center. And root dot set bottom, and that is going to be my bottom. Okay, so 2 things left to do here. One is we have to create our on-action items, and then the second is we have to create this getAnswer method. Before we do that though, let's give this a test. Alright, so I'm coming over to my app, I hit run, and okay, not too bad. I see my answer is not centered. I want to kind of add that in. I had the plus on the wrong side, so I got to get rid of that plus, and I forgot to put my spacing here, but otherwise it's okay. Now notice the choice box, a little bit different style compared to the combo box. And again, nothing's happening right now because we haven't set that on action. So let's go back and take a look. So again, let me fix up a couple things. Just answer the plus should be out of there. And I want to do my bottom dot set alignment, pause dot center. And then I also have my spacing on the right, which I forgot to do, because actually I have my spacing here. I forgot to change it. So that should be good. All right, so now we got to create this getAnswer method. It's relatively straightforward. Again, the idea here is that we have to check each box. We can't just go and pass it which box has been, which radio button has been checked. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to check our negative box. So I'm going to say if first num neg dot is selected, it's a Boolean. So if it's true, then it's going to be a negative number. Then I'm going to say value times equals -1. So basically just make that value -1. Do the same thing for the second number. and change this to value 2. Okay, now I can get into my statement. So I'm going to say basically if add dot is selected, so that's true, then I'm going to return value plus value 2. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next couple. All right, so I have the same thing there. Now, basically, if one of those 3 is not checked, if one is checked, I'm going to hit that return and get out of here. If one of them is not checked, I know I'm at this point, I'm doing division. I don't want to just put the division, though, because if my value 2 is 0, I might get an error. So I just want to basically say if value 2 is equal to 0, return 0. Even though it's not technically correct, I just want to return that for the purpose of this. And then I need my default, which now at this point, I know I don't have a 0 for value 2, and I am into division, so I'm going to just return value divided by value 2. And that'll get everything covered. So let me just give this another run at this point. Now you'll see answer is 10. Oh, my spacing looks good. I still don't have the on action, but the default was 5 plus 5, and so that looked good. All right, so now the last thing we have to do is set our on action. Our on action is pretty similar to what we did with this solution. We're basically going to update the solution text when I have an action. So I'm going to say add dot set on action, and I'm going to use a lambda. And then what the lambda is going to be is just basically label.setText. So my label is solution.setText. And the text is going to be just the same exact thing as what I have here. And make sure I tidy up the end here. I do not want that or that. I think I have one too many. Okay, and so that's my set on action. So I'm just going to now copy and paste this to all of my different buttons and objects that can be changing. So I'll have subtract, set on action, okay, and then I also have to have my first num, my second num, and my first num negative box, and my second num negative box. Okay, and that should be all of them. Let's give it a try. So I give it a run. So now if I click on negative, you see my answer goes to 0. If I change that to -9, that looks good. Negative there. If I multiply 9 times 5, 2 negatives, give me the right number. I get a nice double there. Subtract. Everything looks pretty good. I'm going to change these boxes. Everything seems to be changing. So it looks good. That is the basics of what I wanted to cover today. Let me know if you have any questions or issues. Thanks.